Okay, kind of in mid-flow here, hence the reason my desk's a bit of a tip at the minute. So where are we? What are we up to? Okay, first thing, put an aerofoil section on this plastic sheet here, a little bit of filler just to help blend it in, but the two vertical surfaces have been added to the tailplanes. They just need filling and finessing slightly, so that's those two bits done. Again, tiny little bit of spot filler here or there just to get rid of a couple of air bubbles around the tip, but you can see I've put a micro strip of flange around, and I've made the tail end of the tank a bit more blunt and the nose end of the tank a bit more blunt, so they better resemble British drop tanks rather than the pointy nose American ones. They're not absolutely perfectly scaled, but I'm quite happy with them for the sake of this. Like I said, I'm going for an aircraft that looks right, not one that rivet counters would be happy with, as it were. The interesting thing about the British Skyraider is it doesn't use the pointy inboard wing pylons either, but fortunately the correct pylons are actually in the kit, so I've assembled those. Because these pylons aren't designed for these drop tanks, just had to open the hole slightly to ensure that they fit, but basically these pylons will sit, oops, popped out, inboard, so on the inner wing section they'll sit in this position just about there, so we've got the drop tanks on the wing in the correct place. I've crash moulded a couple of little blisters. Don't know whether you can see that. I'll find the camera close up. Okay, they need a bit of wiping inside because they're a bit dusty, but I've made two. They need a little bit of finessing yet, but there's the two. Where's the camera? There. There's the two little blisters, just crash molded from a piece of acetate. So piece of clear acetate. This bit frosty actually. This is from a sheet that's been vac formed, but I could polish one side of it. But it's PETG clear stuff. Basically, just crash molded a couple of those little pieces. And the last thing that I've been working on since the last video, I've put these 5 standoffs on the wing, and I've done it on the other wing there. Basically, what I've done, instead of accurately trying to cut 10 pieces the same, the way I approached this was just to cut 10 squares with this curve on them. In other words, that would match up to the leading edge of the wing. Those 10 squares were glued on, and then I spent some time with a sanding block, with a long sanding block here, just sanding along the front of them and along the back of them and along the top of them, so that they are all the same size and all the same height, to take again these little pieces of crash molded plastic. All I did was literally crash mold a stick of balsa wood through a rectangular hole, and I've just got a slight curl on the balsa wood, which gives me that leading edge curve. You see it there, which means my leading edge slats, the ends need tweaking yet, will sit proud of the wing, so you can see like that. So you can see from that position they sit neatly, and sit neatly in plan view and in front view, etc. And we can see, and we get that, what we can call high lift devices attached to the leading edge of the outboard wings on the aircraft. So that's nearly finished. There's a couple of colour schemes I've seen with the Suez stripes on. Depending on which version I was doing would depend on whether I added these or not, and I am going to add them before painting, because the version I've seen, the Suez stripe runs to within about 2 mil of these standoffs, and then it stops, but then it runs over the top of this, but then it only runs part of the way. So I've seen one that basically is easy to paint, easy to mask with it in situ. Alternatively, the other way to do it is make it as a separate component. But I always struggle and find it difficult with components like that, gluing them on after I've finished painting it, because all the decals I'm going to have to cheat and make the decals out of strips of tape and masks and all sorts of stuff as we go. Excuse me 1 second. Go, 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 go. Sorry, it's my cat not deciding whether he wants to stay in or go out. Lucky he's not actually taken centre stage yet. So we are getting to the point now where once I've cleaned up that piece and cleaned up these drop tanks, you can see the elevators have been assembled here. Oh, I can see I put the rudder in place on the fuselage. I've just, as I always like to do, I've just biased it to one side slightly. Just gives things a little bit of movement. But we're getting to the point now where I can spray some of these sub-assemblies and start looking at doing an assembly. I've still got some seat belts to put on. Got a little bit of building and finessing and cleaning up to do. But we're getting to the point where we can start to make the aircraft come together, if you like, and start to actually look like an aircraft. These wells here are going to be interior green. The aircraft I've seen, it's sea blue in here, sea blue around here. I'm not that keen on that. I like differential colours here and there to stand out, to look, makes the aircraft look a little bit more interesting. But I've got green in here, black in here, matte black in here, being an aircraft of that age, aircraft of that vintage, matte black cockpit. There'll be black in, so there'll be some, and the sewer stripes, the black and yellow sewer stripes, will help bring out a bit more colour in the aircraft. So I'd love them to be an interior green, and these to be an interior green, but they're not. They are blue, so that colour scheme will be followed to reflect reasonably accurately the actual aircraft. There's not much else I can show you at the moment other than what I've done. I'm actually thinking, as I'm progressing at the moment, I'm thinking, what project am I going to do next? What can I do next and put on? I've got a 32nd scale Halifax I'm putting together for a friend that's in a reasonable state of completion at the moment. Needs quite a lot of work yet still. I don't know whether to do that. I've got some brass work that needs doing on another model, but not brass work as in, well, brass work as in photo etch brass, but not detail work, but actually construction work in brass. It's not a locomotive, it's actually an aircraft, but it's a little bit different. So I'm still mulling over what I can do, and I might even do a what does he call it, an unboxing. It's not necessarily an unboxing, but I could certainly run through the components of the aircraft I'm talking about and show you some quite interesting features of a different kind of kit. Quite an expensive kit, although I think expense at the moment is being redefined when we look at aircraft kits like the Border Models Lancaster, which is going to be coming in circa 550 quid, I think. So I've got one of those on order, and hopefully it'll arrive sooner rather than later. But it certainly means that kits are getting dearer. I think a general look on eBay, and it's apparent that kits aren't as cheap as they used to be. I've seen people discussing this and talking about it. I think COVID might have something to do with it in terms of people staying in. I seem to remember seeing something about Hornby shares rising considerably, and profit rising considerably over COVID, because people were looking for things to do, and building model aircraft kits and model tank kits and model boat kits was something that a hobby that people adopted in 2021 and possibly a little bit earlier in lockdown 2020, because I just noticed today, annoyingly, I'm not sure the reason behind it, but Flying Legends that had moved from Duxford last year and got cancelled has already been cancelled for this year. I'm not quite sure why it's been cancelled this year. I'm assuming it must be a venue thing rather than a COVID thing. knowing the situation as it is now that the government's relaxed all the guidelines, as it were, or rules. I don't think they were guidelines really, it was law. But Flying Legends has already been cancelled, so disappointingly, I was thinking about doing that. Fairford might be the answer this year. Not sure if this current horribleness that's happening in Ukraine will have any knock-on effect or any bearing on things like that are going on, but that remains to be seen. So I don't know whether to pick a little provincial air show somewhere or whether to aim for maybe the Friday on the Fairford. Not 100% sure yet. Not quite sure what we're doing. One of my dream goals would be to go to Oshkosh and spend a week there having a wander around. I'm not sure my wife would enjoy it quite as much as I am, but I am quite lucky in so much as she's a bit of a geek in that sense, and she does like a good warbird, a good jet aeroplane. So not usually too difficult to convince her to go to an air show. She used to be in the cadets, like myself. Right, okay, so what we've got there, plastic weld, as always, for me, to the fore, to do the job. I think it works far better. I see lots of people using Tamiya extra thin, and it's lovely stuff, it's okay. If you're building commercially, certainly no use whatsoever. It takes far too long to dry properly. Plastic weld, different kettle of fish, and dries very, very quickly, and an incredibly good strong bond. You can see I've been working, cleaning, sanding that, and you watch me actually glue it up. That's plastic weld for you. EMA plastic weld. I'm a bit of a brand freak. I'm not an expensive brand freak. EMA plastic weld's probably, I don't know, I haven't checked, but I bet it's probably cheaper than Tamiya. Tamiya extra fine or extra thin or whatever they call it. There's nothing wrong with Tamiya. I just think plastic weld's much better. You have to use it as a capillary glue though. You can't paint it on and stick things together. You have to hold in place and assemble the component in place and allow capillary action to pull the glue in. It works better. But I love it. As a brand, swear by EMA plastic weld. Just like as a brand for thinners, when I'm washing and weathering stuff, I do a lot of weathering of boats. I love my old World War II armed trawlers. I love old civilian boats pressed into wartime use. Armed trawlers, and probably my favourite thing. Just clipped one then and knocked it off. But yeah, armed trawlers are probably my favourite thing, and I use a lot of enamel thinners and oil paint when I'm building those. And the enamel thinners that I swear by, I used to like Humbrol, but in my humble opinion, Humbrol enamel thinners is still good, but it's a little bit too aggressive in terms of underlying paint. If I spray a Tamiya paint on something through an airbrush, if I use HMG thinners, this stuff for weathering, HMG, swear by that, it's lovely quality. It works really well with oil paints, makes a lovely wash, works very well for what I like to do and the way I like to do it. I've not got any quite visible at the moment, but the Humbrol stuff is good thinners, but it's not good thinners for making washes and things like that because it's too aggressive, and if you don't let the paint dry a long time, I mean that HMG I can put over Tamiya paint that I sprayed 10 minutes ago. The Humbrol paint, the Humbrol thinners, I have to let the paint dry for about a day before I can use it, otherwise it strips it back. So I prefer the HMG. Humbrol's good for cleaning your brushes though, hopefully. Right, see, look, if I just let go of that pretty much, sorry, wrong place, bonded, and we'll it to the point where I can even run a bit of sandpaper down it. That's how quick plastic weld is compared to other glues. By far the best answer, I think. Anyway, I'm going to carry on what I'm doing. I'm going to get all these components now up to the point where they're ready for spraying. Then I'm going to put a base coat of spray on some stuff, and I might do a bit of a demo of washing and things like that, and see where we got. We've got decals to apply on odd bits and things like that. So I'm going to make this, or get this as paint ready as I can over the next few hours and work through it. Just made me think before, actually, that component there, quite an unusual shape. You might look at that and think, oh, where would I start making that? But the simple fact is, from start to finish, in terms of time, that component took me just over an hour and 25 minutes to make. From having nothing to finding a drawer and creating the pieces. So it's not, you know, you don't have to invest enormous amounts of time scratch building to come up with unusual models that other people might not have in the collection. I'm sure there'll be one or two people that have converted this aircraft to an airborne early warning in 30-second scale, but it'll certainly be the rarity on a club stand, or if you have friends around having a look at the kind of things you've made. It's, you know, things like this that are completely different but don't involve enormous amounts of difficult scratch building. You can see there, hopefully laid out in front of you, there's not much. A couple of seats, a couple of doors, a couple of slats, a couple of thin pieces, a couple of fuselage formers. The biggest job itself was that. Probably the second largest job was adding this part into the spine, but you can see even there, it's not too difficult. Another former in there, a few bits. It's relatively straightforward stuff, and hopefully showing these and people watching what I'm doing, you can see that it is easier not to be frightened of or not to be scared of. There's certainly no witchcraft involved. It's just a matter of pick some bits up and have a go. Anyway, I'll see you next time.